Hey everyone, welcome to the SPL Waiting Room, your one-stop shop for all things SMITEPro League, except for all the other stuff that I normally say right here, but I can't remember it because it's been a couple weeks, so I'm just going to drop it and instead move on. It's Gormizer, I got Mifflin, I got Trelly hanging out with me as we talk about a fair few things. If you missed it, there were some roster changes, again, that happened, and yes, it is the last week of the phase we're going into. Where maybe there's a correlation. Maybe we'll talk about that. That's going to be something we get to dive into. But last week, I will say, was a very fun week of SPL. I only caught half of it, which was nice for me. At the same time, getting off of what is that word? Vacation. There it is. Yeah. Look, see, I'm still in that mentality, man. We can look, in fact, at some really beautiful graphics that happen to show a lot of the stuff that you might want to know if you missed out on that kind of week. And it's because Blues Ultra is just fantastic at what they do. You should follow them on Twitter, on Reddit, and on Instagram. It's at Blues Ultra, BLUESULTRA. That's how you spell the word ultra. And then you can find out a bunch of stuff. They got a ton of really, really interesting things. They'll tell you, obviously like your most kills, your top KDAs, things like that. They'll also tell you like team totem of coup control, god pick, whether it was like contended, which ones weren't, things like that. And so it's very fun. I think there's even like, it's right there, the Greater Scorpion like discussions as which team's getting more of them, enhanced buffs, things like that. All really fun, all worth looking at. In my opinion, I like looking at them. Usually every Monday, like the day after that. They also do a lot of really, really helpful patch graphics, which are really helpful. Like they're very
This is how I study
visual.
right here.
And so this is like legitimately a very, very, very helpful asset for you. And so thanks to Blues Ultra for just being awesome. That's that.
Understood.
I agree.
I'm rocking this host thing today, baby. I'm nailing it. And that's where we can move on to fantasy.
Oh.
And now this has been a fun one.
We don't need a
Don't
little.
have to.
Mainly because what's happening is that we're all pretty much just playing catch up to Hindu Man. Not only did he win last week by 70 points.
I went crazy this week.
Yeah, you went pretty crazy.
Okay.
But so I'm going to talk to you about the leaderboard because as we can see, Hindu won. First off, I actually want to throw this out there. I've lost 170 points to that one meme trade, and it's really starting to get to me here at the end of the phase. But the good news is that 170 points grand scheme means nothing because Hindu's like 500 points total ahead of everybody.
Well, not me.
No, yeah, like so he's 2,500. I'm at 2,076. You're at 2,002.
Okay,
so
good year. Good year.
Me and you are fighting for second. Everybody else is 19, like JMax 1918. 1893 for Trelly, and then Dave's over there at 1864. Not a very good year from what I remember.
Charlie, you're a chair too, man. You're supposed to be able to predict these
It's
things.
not my fault that the Kings have been choking a bit.
They've been stinking it up the last couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, not anymore, right?
Well, so now one of your players
not.
isn't a king anymore. So how
That's
does this
true.
make you? Well, we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, so maybe that's going to impact Trelly's mentality.
I mean, so far my mentality hasn't been the best. So maybe anything could be a positive.
Well, and you know what? I like it because it keeps Dave at the bottom, and it's just so he can continue
hate
using
Dave.
that. Well, no, because he always likes to go, yeah, I've got big dumb chair one brain, and like the way he says it every time, just fits for me. That makes me, I don't know. It's like a serotonin thing. The way he says it specifically, I can't do it justice.
We'll hear it.
Yeah, he'll say it at some point
Probably like 5 times.
within the week, guaranteed. But we do have another thing, and I almost forgot about these guys, and I can't believe it because it's the MVP. It's the most valuable primer that we have from last week, and of course the discussion is almost always about who could it be? Who's going to be able to grab this? There were.
I
think fair. I do actually know. I
nice.
did write it down. I do have it here. But it's always really fun to watch these teams and like knowing that the players aren't necessarily competing for this, but knowing that they get the little reward. And this week it goes to Panatom for
That makes
playing
sense.
as just as well as they did. Look, if Hindu's gonna thrash us in fantasy, it's for good reason. It's because he's got the Leviathans. Panatom though, Trelly, he just stood out above pretty much everybody last week.
I would argue maybe they are playing for it. Maybe they that every week they spawn in. They're just like, all right, I'm going for MVP this week, and that's sort of the play style that Panatom goes for every week, though, as you said, because he has just been having a great set, but a great week in general. I think a lot of these hard carry gods that he's extremely good at and extremely proficient at have been in the meta as of recent, so he's been getting those real high kill stat games and just popping off, carrying the team, that sort of thing. But I mean, when the Leviathans as a whole are looking this good, you got to imagine Pantom in the topic of conversation for MVP.
I think he just fits in, like you said, pretty much. If the Leviathans are doing well, Panatom's probably, and Mifflin, I mean, you've come out and said that you think he's the best jungler in the league.
Easily.
Often.
Look, as far as I'm concerned, no one is as consistent as Panatom. When we talk about other junglers that completely dominate the game, Lasbra comes to mind.
Yeah.
At times, Fred comes to mind recently as well. But when we talk about them, it's if they're having a good day. I load into a match and I know Panatom's in that game. I'm thinking to myself, well, he's going to at worst do good and at best win me the match, right? So look, as far as I'm concerned, man, and they don't even play through him either. They're playing through Shinto almost exclusively.
Yep.
Shinto, Panatom has to go out there and not only fight the enemies for his farm because it's an invade meta, but he's fighting Shinto too. Because you know if a red buff spawns and Panatom isn't already there, he's fighting over Ku or something else on the map. He's defending Gold Fury. That red buff's going down, and he's not getting that farm, and he's still performing as he is. That guy impresses me a lot.
And for anyone wondering, that's the part of the rant that I love the most. And like, because it almost always like takes a second. Like as you talk about it, then you remember, wait a minute, this guy's like not even getting experience. Are you kidding?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is very fun. But because of that, he's the most valuable primer. And, well, they seem to be doing things well. Again, I think we had mentioned it. Dave, I believe, yelled. Haddix was like walking through the hall last week. And he just yelled, like, Haddix, are you guys peaking at the right time? And he just went, yep. And just kept walking. So they seem to think they're in the right spot. Hopefully it doesn't affect them. I mean, at this point, locked in for first seed? You could just, well, they probably won't because they're going to push that win streak as far as they can. But they could mess around a little bit. They have a little leeway if they so pleased. Unlike some other teams. And we'll get to that. I have a whole list of like scenarios that need to happen for some of those guys. But also, unlike other teams, they've got a consistent roster. And that has not been happening for a lot of people. And this time, well, it strikes again. If you missed the tweet yesterday, it came out, you know, at SMITEPro. You should follow us on Twitter if you don't already. But the Kings have parted ways with Netroid.
Yes.
To pick up Hardcore.
Yeah.
And I will say, we'll touch on that I think a little bit more. We're gonna jump on what the Scarabs are going to end up doing now that Hardcore is left. And what that's going to mean. Also, Baronic leaving because he announced that via tweet. But I will say the funniest tweet I saw yesterday was imagine being Netroid and you got replaced by your solo laner for your carry role twice on two different teams. I was like, that does kind of sting, man. You got to think about it. But the other side of that, right? You lose Hardcore. That already feels kind of bad if you're the Scarabs, right? Mechanically, one of the best players, current reigning World's MVP, feels bad.
Yep.
You also lose the last original member of the Scarabs with Baronic leaving and mid. So now all of a sudden you have to pick up a carry, you have to pick up a mid laner. You also still didn't have a coach yet, so you needed one of those. They pick up a guy, Blast for coach. They just scoop Netroid up from the Kings.
You know this Blast guy?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen him around.
Okay, like a ranked player.
Yeah, I mean, I like his vibe. I can go into more.
What's funny is I think we got told that he came recommended by I believe Biggie, and I believe that's exactly what his words were. Is I like his vibe.
Yeah, good. So me and Biggie on the same page, as you would expect. Ever the large minds in the Smite community, me and Biggie, everyone, we're gonna go down as some of the greats.
Yep.
But then they pick up Netroid to fill the spot for carry. So it's now a Netroid Hurrywind duo lane. And then they pick up Snoopy to play mid. Yeah,
well, what's funny about that? Go on.
I mean, it's just a little crazy, you know? I mean,
what's crazy about it?
I've been casting Snoopy in the SCC for a bit now. He was playing ADC. He played a bit of solo.
Was he good at it or what?
And now he's going into the SPL to play mid.
He played support last year at some point.
He's played mid before as well.
He's trying to, play all roles, I suppose. So good for Snoopy. I'm excited to see it. And I just think, we can only go off of the little information we have. And Sanford Soccer said, after getting to practice a bit, with Netroid and Snoopy, that he feels confident. So I trust him, and I look forward to seeing it.
I have his tweet pulled
there
up
you go.
Because I was exactly going to say that exact thing. I was going to say, well, after all these changes, he says pretty optimistic about the team we can be for Worlds.
Yeah,
and that's the key.
Yeah.
Not the Scarabs that are going to play in 15 minutes. the Scarabs that are playing in a month and a half. Yep. Those guys, he's pretty confident about. And so it's all about that grind for them. And so it's nice to see. I'm excited to see what they have. Again, they're going to be playing the Valkyries here pretty shortly. So I'm excited just to see what that entire thing is going to be like. The other half of this, that maybe isn't half because that's not really how this is sliced. The other fourth of this is hardcore going to the Kings. And you know, it sounded like behind the scenes is a very similar reasoning for the swap that the Leviathans had made. And so now hardcore going to play carry with genetics, playing with big man teams, playing with Twig, playing with variety. It feels like you've got a team that they made this swap because they want Worlds, Mifflin. Like, this is a team that is like, hey, we're going to be a third place, second place contender. We don't want that. We want to get the dub.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say whether or not Yarkor is going to slot into the team in these late game team fights or mid game or rotations, or what exactly Netrud brought to the Kings as far as communication goes, or, you know, shot calling. But if we are talking exclusively about laning phase, this is a blanket upgrade for the Camelot Kings. If we're talking exclusively about 1v1 potential, this is a blanket upgrade for the Camelot Kings. If it's a conversation that revolves entirely around mechanical skill and the ability to land your auto attacks, this is an upgrade for the Camelot Kings. The only concern I have, and it's one that we won't be able to see really fully shine a light on for at least maybe a week, 2 weeks, or until Worlds rolls around, is how he slots into the team environment, how this squad decides to play around him, whether or not it's to Yarkor's liking, if they decide to play through him as a win condition, how he rotates, what the team fights begin to look like. That's the type of stuff I'm keeping my eyes on. Because as far as everything that happens on the map right here on your screen right now, I think Yarkor is just going to do it better than what Netrud was able to.
Yeah, it turns out, like, I think it's come into conversation with a lot of people. Usually, like, support solo are the ones that people talk about, like, most mechanical. I think solo comes out on top most of the time in that conversation. And it turns out when you take a guy who's really good at that, gets world MVP because he's really good at that, although some people will argue about that and Panatom, things like that.
And it should have been Panatom, by the way.
You start to divert that into, okay, well, now we're just going to, like, well, we're going to throw you anywhere. It's like, well, he's got the mechanics.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's all about just whether or not the synergy is there with everybody else. You know he's going to do well himself.
Yep.
But how does it slot into everybody else? That's always going to be the big question. But eyes on the Kings. I think standings-wise, things can't get, like, better for them. They can't break into those top two with where things are now. But I do know that if they're looking at, like you said, you know, in a week, 2 weeks specifically, when the Phase 3 playoffs are going on, all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, now you just got to win 2 sets. You get in, you go to Worlds, you're feeling pretty good. Maybe showcase some team synergy there. Get another month's worth of practice in there, maybe some downtime for the holidays, things like that, and then come back with a vengeance around there. So I'm excited to see what that team has to offer starting this week, but definitely when we get to the playoffs and things like that, because I think they are locked in as far as things go. I think the only ones that can really swap are down there at the bottom, and it requires some really crazy things to go on. We'll get into that a little bit later. The other thing we wanted to talk about before we jump into that is Beads and Aegis. Over the last couple of weeks, you could only have one or the other. Most teams opted for Beads over the Aegis, and so it brought in, you know, we saw more Poseidon. Sasano's suddenly jumped back into the meta. Vulcan became even more of a priority than he was before. And we also saw gods disappear, like AMC, just gone, completely devoid, and disappears. But now that they're both available, again, fixed on Tuesday, Charlie, do you think that we're going to start to see more? What kind of shifts do we see? Do we still see the Susanoo and the Vulcan? Do they just disappear? Does AMC come back? Do we see other gods because the patch changed everything anyway?
Yeah, I think that's what we should probably zone in on, is the fact that, yeah, sure, AMC might be back into the meta now with the Aegis, but he also got heavily nerfed just a bit ago. I think the Stinger cooldown is huge, and also base damage on Swarm means that he's not going to dominate the clear as he used to, so maybe we'll see some shifts there. A lot of mage items got buffed, so that could bring, you know, more magical characters into the mid lane as well. But one of those things that I've got no clue what was going on in scrims. You know, are they just rushing these Chronos Pendant Soul Gem style mages once again? Is Janus back? I doubt those massive changes are going to happen all at once. I think it's going to be a gradual shift, but I do expect to see a bit more burst mages back in the mid lane, hopefully, just because of the way Sands of Time has been a little bit better in them early and things like that, as well as AMC taking some nerfs.
Yeah, I think it's going to... I'm excited to see, because the patch seems to shift a lot of stuff. A lot of it was oriented around the fact that talk to any mid laner in the Pro League over the last 2 months, and they're going to tell you, hey, you can play Vulcan, you can play the Morrigan, or you're playing a hunter. And if you aren't doing one of those three things, you're probably not finding a lot of success.
Or playing set.
Or playing set. Yeah, I guess there were some assassins in there too. Yeah, right. And so it was a lot of not magical that came through and was successful. And so hopefully we'll get to see what these shifts that were made.
I want a Janice meta. I'm down.
Yeah,
No, you don't, bro.
I do, man.
Little bro, I've been here for 3 years. You don't want the
You're
Janice
telling
meta.
me you don't get hyped to see Janice snipes across the map.
No, because for the rest of the game, you're just waiting for him to put his hands behind his back and do this. And then it's like, okay, it didn't hit. Let's wait 60 seconds for him to try again.
All right, well, then they lose if he misses.
Yeah, and he lost a lot.
Because
All
he
right, well, hit better. I don't know. Just hit your roll.
Yo, just be better, bro. Why don't you just play better? On that note, if they can give me plays like United did in Season 7, where they just made a fakie at the Phoenix.
Yeah.
That was sick.
I'm okay with Giannis plays in that regard.
But like Horus does that now.
Yeah, Horus does that.
And he does
and-
it better.
Yeah, we've kind of seen it work. I don't want to take it away. Yeah, maybe we'll get a Giannis meta because he got all of it.
It's been taken away. It's fine.
The
sorry.
thing I think that I'm excited to talk about, and actually I'm going to preface this with a tweet that came out at 10:27 this morning, and it's a guy that's going to be playing in about 10 minutes anyway.
We were at work. When did you see this?
When we sat down. I went to open up and get Sam's tweet so I could read the "Hey, we're feeling optimistic," and I saw this tweet.
Nice.
And so I kept it open for that regard, and it's BinnyQ just saying Valk Super Week begins. Now, Trelly, I am going to point this out. You had said since the hashtag Valks to 6th hashtag started on Twitter, they've lost a lot.
Unfortunately, yes.
Say-
they have.
say what you
so what
said,
were you going
Charlie.
to talk about?
I mean, I love the enthusiasm, but every single time we get on the desk, we're like, let's go Valks to 6, and then they lose. So until they bring that win, like,
You're not on the
how
Valks to
much
6
can
mentality.
how much can I get on the train until it starts taking off?
Well,
the train's not moving
The
yet.
good news is
That's the only time you can board it. It's when it's not moving.
I'm just saying. Okay, first of all, not the way I do it, but
Okay.
if the train's not going anywhere, I'm not getting on. All right.
Understood.
Okay.
Okay.
But I think it could happen. Just so we're
You're
clear.
saying like as
I'm
long, if
optimistic.
you got on a train that wasn't moving, as long as it had a destination in mind, you're getting on.
If I
but
sit
like,
down
if it says it's a train to nowhere, like
and
the
the
midnight
conductor
train,
comes on and says, "Hey guys, we're not going anywhere. This train is just for
Okay.
show." And I'm gonna be like, "All right, I'm out. Like I'm not gonna sit on this train."
Well, I've got good news. They might
Bad
still go
analogy.
somewhere. That being said, it does have a lot of contingencies here. So if you're wondering, the Bolts are 2 sets right now ahead of the Valkyries. Same amount of sets played. It is 4 and 7 versus 2 and 9, I think, is the split right now. And so to match, the Valks have to win 2 of their 3, and they have to hope that the Bolts lose 2 of their 3.
Mm-hmm.
What makes it really interesting is that on Sunday, the last set of the day,
God, I hope.
they play each other.
I hope that it comes down to that set, man.
Now, the good news is that right now, the last time they played, Valks beat the Bolts 2-0, right? But that was, I think, fresh after the Haddock's departure. Things weren't looking good for the Bolts. I think that was the moment we called it like the eye-opener for the Bolts, where it's like, yo, bro, like, what's going on? And so I've got some scenarios for you, because they both have a couple of matchups. They both play today, actually. Then the Valks have a Dragons matchup tomorrow. The Bolts have a Dragons matchup on Saturday. And then they play each other on Sunday. Today,
We'll call those L's.
yeah, that's exactly. So what I did was I wrote down, here's how the Valks can get in. And it all has to start with this very first set. So I will preface this. If the Scarabs beat the Valkyries here, none of this matters anymore. And it's all thrown out the window.
But to be fair to the Valks, and this might be a controversial take, I think this is the best iteration of the Scarabs that we've had in a very long time. In a very, very long time. There is potential that the Scarabs we get this week is better than the Scarabs we've had for the last like 3 or 4 months. So could be a tough one for the Valks.
And do you think, does team synergy factor into that, or are you just like based on individual player mechanics?
Not to get too far into it, but
Save it for the desk. Save it for the desk.
From what I've seen, I think Baronic's been checked out for a very long time. Hard not to be when you've gone through the team changes that he's had. So his performance in mid hasn't been great. Snoopy isn't a mid laner per se, but we know that he's very capable of playing to things like Vulcan. He has a very similar god pool to Baronic. When I think of Snoopy mid, Kukulkan comes to mind.
Yeah.
So if the Scarabs want to slot something in that they're used to,
Also, if they're not
they
playing
can.
mages. He's got that down.
I think that the difference between Snoopy and Depresso Baronic is probably enough to offset the changes between Yarkor and Netrioid. It could be pretty good.
All right. That makes me a little more excited for this one because I was like, man, if roster changes, oh no, this is not going to be as interruption. But yeah, Valks, if they beat the Scarabs, they get 3-9. Then the Titans, if they beat the Bolts later, that would be a great help for the Valkyries and making them 4-8 as opposed to 5 and something. Because if the Bolts win later today, the Valks have to win out every single set they have. They have to beat the Dragons on Friday, which, as you said, I've kind of marked that down as probably unlikely. So if the Titans beat the Bolts, they're 4-8. Valks lose to the Dragons 3-10. Bolts lose to the Dragons 4-9. But then the Valks beat the Bolts at the end of the week 4-10. They have the head-to-head, and all of a sudden they're there. So there's an instance where there's a lot of stops along the way, a lot of trouble that can meet them there, but a chance that the Valks can still make it a 6, still make it into the playoffs, and maybe have their super week begin the way that Benny Q thinks. There's also a chance that in the next 2 hours we find out that it's not possible anymore and that we're going to be seeing them a lot more towards the end of January. No more for the rest of the year, depending on how that one goes. But we don't have to think about it, fantasize about it, or theorize about it, I guess is the better term, as we look at the players and what they're going to bring.
Bud.
Yeah, you too. Well, he was the one talking about this.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, okay.
I just wanted to be involved.
Now you're involved, Charlie.
Thank you.
There you go. My hand's coming out for you. But we can kick into a break. And then when we come back, we'll have the SPL. So thanks for watching. We'll see you in a few minutes.